First off, I want to give a huge shout out to my good friend RedHardBoi who created the animation for me. They really outdid themselves and worked hard on it, and if you want to see more of their work, you can check out the links to their TikTok and Instagram in the description below. Now for today's video, we are going to be looking at a game based off of one of my favorite anime of all time, Bleach. Now Bleach was an anime I remember seeing on Adult Swim as a kid, but didn't get fully into until my first year of high school. What shows like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, and Samurai Jack did from my childhood, Bleach did from my teenage years, along with an assortment of other anime. Now just like every other kid back in the early 2000s, I grew up watching a lot of my favorite anime and action cartoons on Cartoon Network's Toonami block in addition to Adult Swim, with shows such as Dragon Ball Z, Astro Boy, Yu Yu Hakusho, Inuyasha, and more. And while Bleach was also part of that list, it wasn't something I was fully into back then. But then during my teenage years, when I started my freshman year of high school, I was watching Bleach every night on Adult Swim's revived Toonami block. During that time, every Saturday night, I always looked forward to seeing a new episode of Bleach on Toonami. And as you all know, the anime has officially returned, adapting the 1000-Year Blood War arc, the final arc of the manga. And since the anime is already a few episodes in, I thought I'd take you guys back to a time when Bleach was a lot more well known, and covering Soul Resurrection, a game for the PS3. But before I get into the game, I'd like to take this time to give a little history lesson to the few of you watching this who have no idea what I'm talking about.
Bleach is a Japanese manga series first released back in 2001, written and illustrated by TYBW, who also previously made the short-lived 4-volume series Zombie Powder. Back then, Bleach was serialized for Japan's Weekly Shonen Jump, an anthology of many different serialized manga which showcased many different stories of different genres for all fans to enjoy. The story of Bleach focused on Ichigo Kurosaki, a tough and hard-headed but selfless and well-meaning high school student who was born with a supernatural gift to see the spirits of the dead. These spirits came in different forms. Examples include pluses, which are the souls of deceased individuals who have yet to move on from the world of the living to the afterlife, also known as the spirit world. Hollows, which are souls who were once pluses but became darker, corrupt forms of their former selves who devour the souls of the living and the dead. And then there are the Shinigami, also known as Soul Reapers, whose duty is to maintain the balance of souls between the world of the living and the spirit world by helping pluses move on to the afterlife and slaying hollows to purify the corrupted soul and preventing them from harming others. Ichigo also has many friends and gains memorable allies throughout the story as well, including Rukia Kuchiki, the Soul Reaper who was stationed in Ichigo's hometown of Karakura and the one who gave him his powers, Orihime Inoue, a longtime friend and later love interest of Ichigo's who has her own unique spiritual powers which provide healing, defensive, and offensive capabilities, Yasutaro Sato, also known as Chad, an extremely muscular yet gentle giant of Mexican and Japanese descent who possesses raw superhuman strength and an ability called Fullbring, Uryu Ishida, who comes from a race known as Quincy's who can also detect spirits and manipulate a spiritual matter known as Reishi to form into a ranged weapon to kill hollows, and the mortal enemy of Soul Reapers. Cone, a modified soul with a perverted attitude who possesses the body of a small stuffed lion and was the result of a failed project in the Soul Society and the last survivor of the modified souls. Kisuke Urahara, a former Soul Reaper who became Ichigo's mentor and one of the numerous characters who helped train Ichigo. Yoruichi Shihoin, a former Soul Reaper and a master martial artist who also becomes a close ally for Ichigo and his friends, in addition to being one of the many characters in the series to help Ichigo reach his true potential. Renji Abarai, Rukia's childhood friend and lieutenant of Squad 6 of the 13 Court Guard squads in the Soul Society. Byakuya Kuchiki, Rukia's stoic brother-in-law who adopted her into the family and the captain of Squad 6. Kenpachi Zaraki, the bloodthirsty and battle-hardened captain of Squad 11 with a love for fighting and a reputation for his strength and battle tendency. And the Vizards, Soul Reapers who have obtained hollow powers who later helped Ichigo with controlling his hollow powers as well. In addition to meeting new people and making more friends and allies throughout the series, Ichigo was also known for his dedication to protect those he cares about, in addition to his strength and spirit which led him to become stronger and achieve more with his potential as the series went on. Throughout the series, Ichigo also faces antagonists such as the Arrancar, the Fullbringers, the Vandenreich, and perhaps most famously, Sosuke Aizen. One of the most important and possibly most iconic weapons shown and used throughout the series are swords known as Zanpakuto, the primary weapons of the Soul Reapers and Arrancar. Zanpakuto are katanas, each one different from the others with their own unique powers and abilities which when released take on one of two forms, with the first form being Shikai, the initial release form of the Zanpakuto, and Bankai, the second and final release form. One thing that definitely made Bleach fun to read or watch was going through the series and seeing each of the characters' different and unique Zanpakuto forms and abilities. Now there's a lot more I can talk about when it comes to Bleach, but we'd practically be here all day if I did. Throughout the early to late 2000s, Bleach became one of the most popular series in Shonen Jump due to its art style, story, characters, and overall charm. The series was also referred to by fans as one of the big three back in the day, in addition to One Piece and Naruto during the mid-2000s period, which many fans of anime considered the golden age of anime. And while Bleach wasn't particularly as popular as the other two, it still had a pretty huge following at the time. And for a series that was originally going to be a crime-themed gangster anime, it did very well when Kubo changed it into the paranormal genre. Now a lot of popular mainstream anime will of course have video games, and Bleach was definitely no exception. However, during the 6th generation, unlike games based off of series such as Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, One Piece, and many others which made their way to the States, Bleach didn't really have any games which were localized outside of Japan at the time. There were a lot of games made for the PS2, GameCube, PSP, and Game Boy Advance, but they were all only available in Japan at the time. When the 7th generation came, there were a few Bleach games that made their way to the West, such as Bleach Shattered Blade for the Wii, and Bleach Blade of Fate, Bleach Dark Souls, and Bleach the Third Fate, all for the Nintendo DS. And despite the fact that we at least got some Bleach games, there were still so many released for those systems that never made their way to the West. It's kind of upsetting that there were so many Bleach games that we never got to play at the time, but thanks to emulators that shouldn't be a problem now. And of course, there's the iOS games, including Bleach Brave Souls, which has a huge following in the Bleach community and is considered one of the driving forces that kept the series alive, and in a way helped us get the anime adaptation of the final arc. But there's one Bleach game which fans of the series were blessed with making its way to the West, and that's Bleach Soul Resurrection, also known as Soul Ignition in Japan. Released exclusively for the PS3 on June 23, 2011 in Japan, and then in North America in August of the same year. The game was developed by the now defunct Japan studio, who also developed the Ape Escape games The Legend of Dragoon, Siren, the Gravity Rush games, Ico, Shadow of the Colossus, and The Last Guardian. It was also published by Sony Interactive Entertainment in Japan and NIS America for the North American release.
Bleach Soul Resurrection was a game I picked up when my love for the series first peaked, so I wanted to make a video for all my fellow Bleach fans out there. But is it a game that Bleach fans should try out and take a look at? Well, let's check it out.
Now before I start this, I do want to point a few things out. For those of you who may not know or haven't seen my Xbox retrospective, I use the Elgato HD60 to record game footage for my videos now rather than using my video camera. However, due to the PS3 having a permanent HDCP setting, I had to do some workarounds by resorting to an HD splitter in order to capture footage for the video, which in turn can only allow the footage to be at 720p at 30 frames per second, so I apologize in advance if the quality of the game looks a little bit choppy. Also, my old PS3 Slim I had previously no longer worked, and because my dumbass forgot to upload the save data to the cloud, I lost all my progress and had to start all over again, so everything you'll be seeing in this video will be gameplay from scratch.
Of all the save files I had to lose.
Anyway, enough rambling, let's get started with the game. Now when you first start up the game, you get treated to this really cool opening intro made originally for the game with an instrumental mix of Renbu no Melody, the song that played in the anime's 13th opening. Which is weird because the Japanese version of the game had the actual song in the intro. I think it may have had to do with licensing issues. After you start up the game, you are treated to 3 different modes: Story Mode, Mission Mode, and Soul Attack. The story mode of the game takes place during the Arrancar arc and starts off where the group invades Hueco Mundo all the way to Ichigo's final battle with Aizen. So don't expect characters from the Fullbringer arc or even from filler arcs like the Bounce or the physical manifestations of the Zanpakuto to be in this game. With the story mode, it's divided into episodes, with there being 14 episodes in total. Each episode plays out different events from the arc. In each episode, you play as one of the characters from the series for that event. When you hover over the mission to select it, it'll have the character signifying who you're going to be playing as for that mission, or one of the antagonists from the arc you'll be fighting against in that mission. Throughout the episodes, you fight against groups of hollows while going from point A to point B. A majority of the hollows are the same ones you'd see in the series, such as the Fishbones and Zalapero's Fraction, while some have unique alternate appearances from the original hollows. The game plays in a similar manner to the Dynasty Warriors games, where you'll have groups of enemies come at you at once, except very linear and you don't have any allies to fight with you. However, in Soul Resurrection, although it's encouraged to fight against enemies you come across, you can literally just go through the level without fighting them at all. This isn't recommended, but I'll explain why later. There will be times, however, where as you are progressing through the area, you'll be stopped by green honeycomb gridded walls, and in order to continue, you'll have to defeat all or the specific hollows it tells you. Once you reach the final area, you'll have to fight and defeat the boss in order to complete the mission. In the first two missions, the final bosses are groups of hollows, such as a group of Minos Grande in the first mission when playing as Ichigo, and the room full of Solapros Fraction in the second mission when playing as Uryu. The rest of the missions, however, the final bosses will be one of the antagonists the playable character of that mission will fight against. So you'll get to relive iconic battles from the arc, such as Ichigo's fight with Grimmjow, Zaraki's fight with Noritora, Vastolore Ichigo's fight with Okiura, Soifan's battle with Baragon, Shunsoi's battle with Coyote Stark, and Ichigo's climactic battle with Aizen in Ichigo's Mugetsu form. Now, although reliving and experiencing some of the most memorable battles from the series may sound cool to the average Bleach fan, don't expect a huge compelling story from this game if you're not a fan of the series to begin with. Because despite the fact that the levels in this game are each from a different part of the arc, it doesn't go deep into the details of the story like the anime or manga does. Before you start each level, you'll get a short recap or explanation of what goes on or what happened during the events of that portion from the arc, but unless you watch the anime, you still won't know what the narrator's talking about. And even in the cutscenes, it just cuts straight to the point without any context or explanations of plot points, so unless you've watched the series, you won't know what's going on throughout the story. It feels more like an abridged get-to-the-point kind of story rather than one that has any build-up or shows any character development. I mean, in the anime, when they showed Coyote Stark and Lillinet's backstory during their fight with Shunsui, you get an understanding for his character and even tend to feel sorry for him for hearing his side of the story, and that just made his death more heartbreaking than anything. Same could be said with Kenpachi's fight with Noritora or Baragon's fight with Soifan. Whether you read the manga or watch the anime and you get to these guys, not only do you see their characteristics and personalities, but you also see their backstory and their reasons for why they fight, and what their motivation is that drives them to be who they are. You won't find any of that in this game. In each level, it's pretty much the same thing. You fight against hordes of enemies, you get a cutscene that plays before the boss fight in addition to some dialogue, you fight the boss, you sometimes get another cutscene during the middle of the fight, you defeat the boss, and that's it, the level's over. Hell, even the final boss fight of the game with Sosuke Aizen feels anticlimactic. In the anime, Ichigo defeats Aizen using Mugetsu, which severely damages Aizen but also leaves Ichigo powerless, losing all of his Soul Reaper powers in the process. Despite this technique heavily damaging Aizen, it doesn't kill him but weakens him enough for the Hogyoku to reject him and have him be sealed away by Kisuke. In the game, however, when you defeat Aizen, it plays a cutscene that mimics that of what you would see from the anime. However, unlike the anime, the game shows Aizen being swallowed by Mugetsu's darkness completely, implying that it has killed him. Then we see fanservice Ichigo as he silently looks up to the sky after losing his powers, and that's it, the game ends. Because of the fact that the game's story mode isn't as fleshed out or developed the same way as the manga or anime, I personally wouldn't recommend this game unless you're already a fan of Bleach and that you've read or watched the series entirely, or at least up to this point of the series. But of course this video is for all my fellow Bleach fans out there, and now that I got the story out of the way, let's look at the gameplay. In Bleach Soul Resurrection, you play as most of the main cast of characters such as Ichigo, Uryu, Rukia, and more who you can unlock as you play through the game. As you progress through the story mode, you'll unlock more characters to play as such as Aizen, Gin, and most of the Espada after defeating them. However, if you are hoping to play as characters from the series such as Renji, Chad, Ukitake, Yamamoto, or even any of the Vizards, then you're unfortunately out of luck. Now, as stated before, Bleach Soul Resurrection is a hack-and-slash action game that plays similar to the Dynasty Warriors games. In each level, as you go from point A to point B, you'll come across hordes of different types of hollows. You push the square button for your basic melee attacks and the triangle button for your ranged attacks. The circle button will have the character perform a special attack that can turn the tide of battle, and they are different depending on whether you attack while on the ground or in the air. Each character you play as in the game have their own unique combos and attacks, and pretty much all of them have their own unique attack patterns, which can lead to continuous air combos when followed by a jump after launching enemies into the air. In addition to each having their own attack combos and special attacks, many of the characters have different playstyles, making them unique from one another. For example, Ichigo can be considered a balance of melee and ranged. Characters like Uryu and Stark focus more on range attacks, and then there's characters like Kenpachi and Yoruichi, who are focused more on close combat attacks while still having some ranged abilities. As for special attacks, each character's attack is based off of an ability you would see from the series, such as Ichigo's Tenbarenjin when activated in the air, Rukia's Somenomai Sokishiro, Soifan Suzume Bachi, Grimmjow's Gran Ray Sero, and Byakuya's Senbon Sakura Kageyoshi. Hell, you've even got Noritora's— Wait, 2 of his attacks are called I don't like you and this is stupid? That's a bit redundant, isn't it?
I don't like you!
Alright, you've made your point. Now, in addition to different abilities and special attacks, there's also the ignition gauge. As you deal damage and defeat enemies, your ignition gauge starts to fill. Once the gauge is full, you push L2 to activate ignition mode, which enhances the character's attacks and abilities and practically triples the damage. And when you push L2 again after activating ignition mode, you will perform an extremely powerful attack which can practically kill or heavily damage every enemy in your way. Just like with special attacks, each character's ignition attack is based off of their most powerful ability from the series, such as Ulquiorra's Lanzo del Relampago, Stark's Cero Metralleta, Baragon's Respira, Toshiro's Hyoten Hyakaso, Uryu's Sprenga, and of course Ichigo's full-powered Getsuga Tensho. When the ignition gauge is activated, it'll start to deplete over time, but you can keep it filled by continuously attacking and killing enemies. And when it runs out, you can fill it up again over time. Whenever you attack enemies, you'll start a combo counter which increases the more you attack enemies. Once the combo counter starts and you stop attacking at some point, you'll have a limited amount of time to attack an enemy based on the red meter under the counter, and once that meter empties, then the counter will be reset. The best way to keep your counter up is by making sure there's a ton of enemies around when activating ignition mode, because not only does it enhance the powers of your attacks, but also the range for most of them. For example, take Ichigo's Tenbarenjin. Watch how much my combo counter increases in ignition compared to pre-ignition. Whenever you complete a level in this game, you'll be brought to the ranking screen, which showcases your time on how long it took for you to beat the level, how many enemies you defeated, and how many ignition attacks have been used. Sometimes it also depends on the difficulty you played the level on, and depending on how your stats turn out, you are awarded a rank for the level, with the highest being S rank. Throughout the game, you'll also collect soul points in each level. You'll get soul points from defeating enemies. The more enemies you defeat, the more soul points you'll collect. And also with the combo counter, once you reach 100 on the counter, you'll earn double the soul points you collect, and once you hit 300, you'll earn triple. Now, aside from getting a high ranking, the soul points are another reason I would not recommend skipping through hordes of enemies in each level. The amount of soul points you collect can affect your score a bit, and depending on how you've progressed in the level, you can earn bonus soul points. The soul points are used as upgrade points to help level up the playable characters, which is what I will get to next. So in Soul Resurrection, to upgrade your characters, you go to the Level Up menu. Here's where you can spend the soul points you've earned to purchase upgrades such as health upgrades, attack upgrades, spiritual pressure gauge increases, and much more. Now, each character has their own web of upgrades, but they vary in size, meaning they vary in what upgrades can be purchased in their web. And the characters can also share each other's upgrade webs too. Say that you're upgrading Ichigo and you purchase all the upgrades on his own web, but then you can purchase upgrades available on Uryu's web to obtain more upgrades for Ichigo and vice versa. However, it's not as easy as it may sound. That's because each character's upgrade web also has a lock at the ends that lead to another character's web, and the only way to unlock them is to level up certain characters at a certain point. Every time you purchase an upgrade, you level up the character. Now, before I go further into the upgrade web, I'm going to talk about the next mode for this game, Mission Mode. Mission Mode is basically the challenge mode for this game. This mode is where you can play as every character, including the ones you unlocked in the story mode. This is also the mode where you can grind for the most soul points too. There are a total of 28 missions, each with their own variety of challenges and objectives. Some missions are as simple as fighting through enemies until you get to the level's boss like in the story, or going against waves of enemies in one arena-like level until the boss appears. But there are those that can be pretty challenging, such as levels where you can't refill your health, levels where you can't use your ignition gauge at all, levels where one hit can kill you but the same applies to the enemies, and levels where you have to fight 3 or more bosses at once. Now, as I said before, Mission Mode is the best mode to invest time into grinding for soul points. There is one small little detail one needs to know about. Now, I mentioned previously that soul points are used for upgrading your characters. However, it should be noted that the soul points are not shared for every character entirely. Each character earns their own sum of soul points from playing as them in either mission mode or story mode, meaning you can't grind soul points with one character like say Ichigo and use those soul points you earned with Ichigo to upgrade a separate character like say Grimmjow. Each character gets their own earnings of soul points. Whatever you get with Ichigo's is for Ichigo only, whatever you earn with Uryu is for Uryu only, and and so on. In other words, you need to grind with each individual character to earn soul points to unlock upgrades for them. Now I know this doesn't sound tedious, but it can be when you do it with characters you don't like playing. For example, Tear Hollybell is one of the characters I really don't like playing as because she's so slow and her attack recovery takes some time. But if I want to unlock the pathway that leads to the upgrade web of Stark, a character I love playing as, and get her upgrades and vice versa, I have to upgrade Tear Hollybell until she reaches level 9, and it's the same for pretty much all the characters. This is also another reason why I wouldn't recommend playing this game if you're not a fan of the series, because this game involves a lot of time and a lot of grinding. Now that's not really a big issue. I mean, there are games where you have to grind to get better, but each game where you have to grind is different, and with Bleach, I doubt one would want to invest their time and energy into this game, unless you already have a love for the series in general and dedicate yourself to grinding in this game. You have to reach a certain level for their upgrade web to be open to the other characters, and if you didn't reach a certain level for them, you won't be able to get any more upgrades for the characters you do play as until you do some work.
So yeah, unless you dedicate your time and energy into this game, it can be a real chore to level up and even max out the characters. But, to put it in a more optimistic standpoint, I like to see this as a way for the game to tell you to try out each character and better yourself for them, and in the end, it can be really rewarding when you do.
Personally, I would have preferred if all characters shared one bed of soul points because I'm a scrub, but like I said, it encourages you to play the other characters. Each character has their own playstyle, and one thing you can do is experiment with each character to see if they work with certain stages. That's one of the biggest things that will help with leveling up the characters. Just find the stage or stages that's right for said characters and use those stages to grind and level them up. For example, the one mission where you have to fight through enemies that die in one hit but you can't get hit once or you die, that's the best mission for ranged characters like Uryu and Stark because you have more of an advantage with their ranged focus attacks. Or missions where you fight hordes of enemies are best for missions like Ichigo, Baragon, and Byakuya because they have attacks that are good for crowd control and for dealing major damage to groups of enemies. This is something that does make mission mode fun at least. A lot of the missions, particularly the later ones, can get really hard, but once you grind and work your way enough to level up the characters best used for those missions, it gives you a huge sense of satisfaction after you win. And again, it's a great way to play as the other characters too because they all have really cool abilities and playstyles. Ever wanted to play Ichigo's badass Vastolore form that wiped the floor with Ulquiorra? You can in this game. Grimmjow has always been one of my favorite Espada in the series next to Ulquiorra and Stark, and playing as him feels so satisfying. Coyote Stark is also one of my favorite characters to play as because his gameplay style with the use of his guns gives me huge Devil May Cry vibes. And when you play as Aizen, his abilities are just what you'd expect from one of the most overpowered villains in anime history. Look at this guy, one of his abilities allows you to damage enemies while you just walk right past them. I'd hate to see how OP he gets when you max him out. Mission mode is also where you can unlock some cool rewards. Whenever you beat a mission, you'll be awarded with cool displays of the characters from the show. There's no real purpose for them other than being trophies, I guess, but they're all really cool and have some pretty neat designs. There are also certain missions where you can unlock additional characters such as Skull-clad Ichigo and Kokuto from the Hellverse movie, and of course Mugetsu form Ichigo. There's also Soul Attack mode where you can beat other players' scores online via the leaderboards, but since this game is so old and the PS3 has been mostly abandoned at this point, I highly doubt it's of any significance today. Still, if you want to beat someone's score, go for it. I doubt they'll care. Bleach Soul Resurrection was a pretty decent game back when it was released and was a pretty nice and fun game for Bleach fans to have in North America. The gameplay may be your typical hack and slash action game, but it's still fun with its variety of characters and at times rewarding challenges. The art style for the game is actually really good too. The environment in most of the levels have the atmosphere that makes you feel like you're part of the anime and looks really detailed and pretty. The character models aren't bad either. Despite being cel-shaded like a majority of these types of games are, it's probably one of the best anime licensed games that I've seen in all my years with really detailed character designs. I also love the fact that this game has both English and Japanese language options for fans who enjoy the sub or the dub. Speaking of voice acting, the English cast of the series overall did a really good job with their voice lines for the game. Considering the fact that this game came out around the time when the dub of the show was in the middle of the flashback arc when it was on Adult Swim and they didn't even get to the part of the series this game is based off of until about a year later. So of course certain lines and voice directions in the game will be different from that of the show since the show reworded the dialogue in the dub, but still it's cool to hear the English cast say lines straight from the manga. Now again, don't go into this game expecting a detailed story if you have no experience with Bleach. Because with the lack of context that flows with the plot points of the arc coupled with the grindfest that you practically need to dedicate yourself to, it's really not a game I would recommend unless you're a fan of Bleach and if you've watched the series or at least caught up to this point of the series. I believe that if I wasn't a fan or never watched Bleach, I'd probably get bored of this game pretty quick. But as a Bleach fan, I'd definitely say it's a pretty decent game even for today. It has a lot of fan favorite characters from the series, you get to relive some of the coolest battles from the arc, and the mission mode, while a grindfest at times, can feel rewarding and even addicting. If you're a fan of Bleach and never played this game, I would at least recommend giving this a shot. It's not terribly expensive, but it's up there in price, around the $30 to $50 range. I personally wouldn't invest that much in a game like this, so I'd either do research for a lower price, or you can always go for an emulator, which I'd honestly recommend at this point.
Well, that was fun to relive that. You know, it's always fun to go back and play games based off of your favorite anime or cartoon because it just feels so nostalgic to do so. And this was back at a time when Bleach was really in its prime. But, you know, now that we've got the new anime series going on in addition to a bunch of other amazing anime out such as Chainsaw Man and Spy Family, we're eating pretty good this fall season, aren't we? Well, until next time, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm Shane, also known as Wonder Subset. Take care, everybody.